Toastmasters, honored guests. Nearly 11 million people in the easternmost part of Africa are in desperate need of water, food, and sanitation. The cause? Historic drought, the worst in 60 years. Today, I want to tell you about the nature of that drought. I want to explain it in terms of the human toll it's taking on the lives there, but also to get you to understand the unnatural causes, the conflict and the war that produced this humanitarian crisis. The map that's coming around to you shows you the Horn of Africa. It's the easternmost tip of Africa. It's a region of 772,000 square miles, the equivalent of two of our largest states, Alaska and California. Population, 100 million. The same population that inhabits the entire east coast of the United States from Maine to Florida. Now, in such a large area, there are so many different ethnic groups, dozens in fact, in the countries of Kenya, Ethiopia, Djibouti, and Somalia. What unites those very desperate groups are the way that they interact with the land. They're either pastoralists, those who are hunters or gatherers, or they're agriculturalists, those who grow crops that feed their family or feed whole villages. This particular lifestyle, however, has made them very dependent on climate. For the past 2 years, global weather conditions have caused a severe drought. Now, scientists believe that this drought is caused by a weather pattern very, very far away, the La Nina phenomenon in the eastern Pacific. It's a weather pattern that has caused massive flooding and rains in places like Indonesia and Australia and Philippines, but has left the eastern Horn of Africa in drought conditions and famine. Now, there's a lot of uncertainty about that, about what causes drought, what causes natural disasters. But one thing we do know are the consequences. For the last 2 years have been falling food supplies, dead livestock, dead crops. And in mid-July, the United Nations declared famine in only one region of that very large Horn of Africa region, Somalia. 11 million total, but 3.5 million of them are in Kenya, living there in malnourished conditions. That includes 385,000 children. Now, their declarations, their statistics, and their science, all in dispute, but pictures don't lie. Stories don't lie. These are the stories and pictures of refugees, of starving children, dead crops, desperate lives, destroyed families. This is the reality of drought and famine. But there's another story, one that we don't commonly know or are told. It's a story that simply leads us to believe that this can all be avoided, because famines are man-made. Famines are the result of conflict. Famines are the result of war. It's no surprise that Somalia, in that very large region, is the only region that is experiencing famine, while Kenya and Ethiopia, as portrayed on the map, are areas where there are food crises and food emergencies. So what about Somalia? Well, Somalia is the story of conflict, 2 decades worth of conflict. The type of conflict that a UK journalist, Scott Peterson, describes in a book called Me Against My Brother. Now, 2 decades of conflict, war, poverty, arms, weapons, has produced a situation in which the people and the lives of a very small country within that region are suffering. From 1970 to 1990, at least 1.5 million inhabitants of Somalia have been forced to flee. In fact, in March of this year, there was another conflict in which the internationally recognized group Al-Shabaab, terrorist group, was fighting government forces, causing a massive flux of refugees to leave Somalia and into Kenya. Probably know about that. How many of you know about that? Very few. Well, now, the cries, the voices of those suffering, those fleeing violence and conflict in Somalia, it's very hard to ignore. It's reached a crescendo. Are we going to listen this time? Today, I wanted you to think about the toll of drought, famine in Horn of Africa and East Africa. An area of people suffering. But I want you to remember that it's more than bad weather that's causing this crisis. It's conflict. It's war. It's terrorism. Once we know the story of these inhabitants, some 11 million, then maybe we'll have the courage, maybe we'll have the ability to understand their suffering and act on our very best impulses to help with courage and compassion. Thank you very much.